Welcome to my channel. The morning sunlight streamed lazily through the blinds, dust motes dancing in the warm glow. Ethan stirred in bed, squinting at the unfamiliar brightness. He wasn't exactly a morning person, but today felt different. There was a tension in the air, a mixture of anticipation and dread. Something had shifted in his life, something irreversible, or at least that's how it felt. Ethan had always been careful, disciplined, almost obsessively so. By day, he was a software engineer, typing away at lines of code, solving problems, and presenting a calm, controlled image to the world. His colleagues knew him as dependable, meticulous, and a little reserved. They had no idea of the secret side of him, the part of himself that craved transformation, softness, and a chance to explore the more delicate, hidden facets of his identity. For years, Ethan had experimented in secret. Late nights in front of the mirror, softly brushing out his hair, trying on clothes that weren't his, layering on subtle makeup, small, private experiments that fed a side of him he couldn't show anyone. He had never crossed the line publicly, never risked exposure. These moments were fleeting escapes, little indulgences in a life otherwise defined by routine and responsibility. He was careful, precise, even with these secret explorations. Clothes were folded back into place, makeup removed with meticulous care. His heart raced every time he experimented, but the thrill was addictive. There was a sense of duality to his life, Ethan the professional, confident man in public, and Ethan the secret dreamer, exploring the softness, the vulnerability, the elegance he kept hidden. But this morning, everything had changed. Ethan glanced at the small bottle on his nightstand. It wasn't supposed to be his. It wasn't meant for him. A simple misread label, a hurried decision during a late-night online purchase, and suddenly, the world had shifted. He had accidentally ordered a hormone supplement. Not the gentle vitamins he thought he had clicked add to cart on, but something that promised physical changes, and faster than he could have imagined. His hands trembled slightly as he held the bottle. Part of him wanted to laugh at the absurdity, the impossibility. Yet the other part, the part that had longed to explore this side of himself, felt a spark of curiosity. What would happen? How quickly would the changes show? And what would Isabella say? The apartment was quiet, a cozy two-bedroom tucked in the heart of the city. Books lined the shelves, a collection of video games stacked neatly on the console, and a faint smell of coffee lingered in the air. This was his sanctuary, the one place where he could explore his hidden self without judgment, or so he had always believed. Today, however, that sanctuary felt smaller, tighter, suffocating even. Every corner of the apartment reminded him that soon, nothing would feel the same. His reflection in the bedroom mirror seemed sharper, more critical, more observant. Was that a subtle change in his features? Or just his imagination? He couldn't be sure. Isabella. The thought of her sent a rush of conflicting emotions through him: desire, fear, admiration, and a quiet dread. She was sharp, confident, and beautiful, with a teasing sense of humor that could disarm him instantly. They had been dating for a little over a year, and for the most part, everything seemed perfect. Yet, beneath the surface, Ethan carried a secret he had never shared. Isabella knew he had quirks, little eccentricities, but she didn't know the depth of his hidden desires. The hours spent exploring clothes and makeup, the quiet longing to step into a softer, more delicate version of himself. He remembered the countless moments of hesitation. What if she doesn't understand? What if she laughs? What if this changes everything between us? And now, with the hormone supplement accidentally in his system, there was no going back. Every glance in the mirror, every small shift in his features, every fleeting sensation of softness in his skin was a reminder. His life was about to change in ways he could not control. Ethan sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the bottle. The label seemed to mock him: transform your life. One dose at a time. His pulse quickened. Part of him wanted to throw it away, to destroy the temptation and return to his routine, predictable life. But another part, a part he had long suppressed, wanted to see it through. What if this mistake was the key to a secret side of himself he had never dared to explore openly? What if, despite the risk, this was the push he needed to finally embrace who he was, fully and without shame? The thought made him shiver, not just with excitement, but with fear. The consequences were unknown. The changes could be irreversible. Isabella's reaction was uncertain. And yet, he couldn't resist the pull, the thrill of possibility that coursed through his veins. The room felt charged, heavy with anticipation. Outside, the city moved on, oblivious to the personal storm brewing within the walls of his apartment. Inside, Ethan faced a choice: maintain the life he had meticulously crafted, or step into a transformation he had only ever imagined, a transformation that could alter everything: his body, his relationship, his identity. And deep down, he knew that once the first step was taken, nothing would ever be the same. The first few days were subtle, almost imperceptible. Ethan noticed changes in small ways: a softness to his skin that hadn't been there before, a delicate rounding of his jawline, a subtle warmth that made his body feel unfamiliar. At first, he chalked it up to imagination or stress, convincing himself that it was all in his mind. But the mirror told a different story. Standing in the bathroom, towel draped over his shoulders, he traced his fingers over his face. The contours were different, smoother, gentler. Even his hair seemed to fall differently, framing his features in a way that caught him off guard. He felt a twinge of panic and a surge of excitement simultaneously. This isn't supposed to happen. But maybe it's what I've always wanted. Ethan's emotions were a storm. Every glance in the mirror brought a mix of thrill and fear. He couldn't deny the subtle excitement, the rush of feeling a softer, more feminine version of himself emerging. Yet the fear was constant. What if Isabella notices? What if she rejects me? What if this is permanent? He found himself overanalyzing every movement, every expression. Even a casual reflection in a spoon on the kitchen counter made him jump, the sight of his changing face both intoxicating and terrifying. Each change forced him to confront parts of himself he had hidden for years. At night, he lay awake, heart racing. He thought about his friends, his colleagues, his family. No one could know. And yet, he couldn't stop watching his body change. There was a compulsion in it, an irresistible pull that made him feel alive in ways he had never imagined. By the end of the first week, the changes became undeniable. His chest felt fuller, his hips subtly rounding, his muscles softening. Clothing that had once fit comfortably now felt slightly loose, shifting in unexpected ways. He had to adjust, subtly, walking carefully to accommodate the new weight distribution, the new sway of his hips. One evening, alone in the apartment, he decided to explore further. He retrieved a pair of stockings, a skirt, and a blouse from the back of his closet, the remnants of past secret experiments. As he dressed, each piece of clothing felt different now. The silk of the blouse clung in new ways, the skirt swayed perfectly with his changing body. Then came the makeup. Applying it now was electric. Every brushstroke highlighted features that had softened under the hormone's influence. The lipstick, the mascara, the subtle blush, they weren't just cosmetics, they were revelations. He looked in the mirror and gasped. The person staring back at him wasn't just Ethan in disguise. It was a real, tangible version of himself he had longed to see. Dressed and made up, Ethan felt both powerful and vulnerable. The thrill of transformation mingled with fear. He practiced walking in heels, swaying slightly, careful not to lose balance. Each step was a reminder of the body he now inhabited, a body that was changing faster than he could control. He touched his face, his arms, his hips, marveling at the smoothness, the new contours. The reflection in the mirror no longer frightened him. It invited him in, coaxed him to explore further. Yet the thought of Isabella returning unexpectedly made his pulse spike. He couldn't let anyone see him like this. Not yet. Days passed, and the tension built. Ethan had to navigate his life carefully. At work, he maintained his usual masculine demeanor, but at home, he explored this new identity in secret. Every knock at the door, every unexpected message from Isabella, sent waves of anxiety through him. He began leaving little hints of his transformation in subtle ways. A new hair product on the counter, a slightly different scent lingering in the air, but nothing overt. The thrill was in the secrecy, in the knowledge that he was living a double life. Then came the first close call. Isabella had mentioned she might come home early from a work meeting. Panic set in. Ethan ducked into the bedroom, adjusting the skirt and wig, trying to make himself small, trying to pretend he was just normal. His heart raced with every step she might take closer, every sound from the living room. Ethan began to feel trapped between worlds. He wanted to explore this new identity fully, to embrace the changes and the thrill, but the fear of exposure loomed large. Each day, the hormonal changes accelerated, making him more aware of his evolving body. His chest, hips, and even his voice began to shift subtly, creating a growing sense of urgency and panic. He experimented with different outfits, different styles, testing the boundaries of his secret. The mirror became both friend and enemy, reflecting his desires and his fears simultaneously. Every brushstroke of makeup, every wig adjustment, every click of heels against the floor reminded him how fragile his secret was. Ethan's internal dialogue became more intense. He questioned who he really was. Was this mistake a curse, or a liberation? Was he losing control, or finally finding it in a form he had always denied himself? The hormones were changing him physically, yes, but emotionally, he was undergoing a transformation just as profound. He began journaling in secret, documenting the changes, the feelings, the excitement, and the panic. Each entry was a raw exploration of his evolving identity. He wrote about the fear of being judged, the thrill of transformation, and the intense intimacy of living in a body that felt both new and familiar. As the days progressed, Ethan felt the inevitability of exposure looming. The accidental hormones had set events in motion he could no longer control. Every reflection, every outfit, every brush of silk reminded him that his life was changing permanently. The thrill of crossdressing and the reality of his hormone-induced transformation were colliding in ways that left him exhilarated and terrified. He knew one thing for certain: the moment would come when he could no longer hide, when Isabella would see him fully as he had become. And when that moment arrived, nothing would be the same. The stakes had never been higher, and the suspense of impending discovery made every heartbeat a countdown. The apartment felt smaller than ever. Shadows stretched along the walls, echoing the tightness in Ethan's chest. His reflection in the mirror no longer felt like a stranger. It was him, undeniably, irreversibly changed. The hormones had accelerated his transformation far faster than he imagined. His chest had rounded, hips swayed naturally with every step, and even his voice had softened slightly, betraying the changes he had tried to keep hidden. It happened suddenly. A loud knock at the door shattered the fragile calm. Ethan froze mid-step, heels clicking lightly on the floor, silk skirt swaying. His mind raced. Isabella? Or worse, someone else. Perhaps a neighbor, curious and nosy, ready to uncover his secret? Before he could think, the doorknob rattled. Panic surged. He tried to pull the skirt down, to fix the wig slipping over one shoulder, but the anxiety made his hands tremble. Ethan, it's me. Isabella's voice came through the door, calm but inquisitive. He exhaled in relief, a mixture of exhilaration and dread. She opened the door, stepping inside, and paused mid-frame. Her eyes widened, not with anger, but with astonishment. Ethan's heart pounded like a drum. He could feel every curve, every change, as if the hormones had magnified his senses. The silk skirt clung to his hips, the blouse brushed softly against his chest, and the heels forced him to adjust every movement carefully. He was acutely aware of the vulnerability his body now expressed. Isabella didn't speak at first. She just looked, taking in the changes, the softness of his face, the subtle fullness of his curves, the delicate sway of his hips. Ethan felt naked under her gaze, exposed in ways he had never imagined. Ethan, what happened? She finally asked, voice a mixture of disbelief and curiosity. It was a mistake, he stammered, voice shaking. I didn't mean for this to happen. It was just hormones. An accident. Her expression softened slightly, but the tension didn't leave the room. Every second stretched, a fragile thread threatening to snap. Ethan's reflection in the mirror caught his eye. The mirror reflected two selves, the man he had always been, and the emerging woman he was becoming. One side was familiar, safe, controlled. The other was exciting, terrifying, and utterly vulnerable. The juxtaposition was overwhelming. He reached up to adjust the wig, accidentally knocking it slightly askew. His chest rose sharply as he tried to cover the slip, a blush creeping up his cheeks. Isabella's eyes followed every movement, a mix of intrigue and concern. You don't have to hide, she whispered. I want to understand. I want to see everything. Her words were both comforting and terrifying. For the first time, Ethan realized that acceptance wasn't guaranteed, yet rejection was possible. And with the hormones continuing to change him, the window for control was closing. Just as he began to feel a flicker of courage, another knock rang out, urgent and insistent. Someone else had arrived. The neighbor? A delivery? The unknown threat loomed, reminding him that his secret was still fragile. Panic clawed at his chest. Every instinct screamed to hide, to undo the transformation, to return to safety. But he couldn't. The body he inhabited now was no longer just a costume. It was real, alive, undeniable. He tried to calm himself, taking slow breaths, heels pressing into the floor, skirt clinging to hips, wig sliding slightly over one shoulder. Every sensation reminded him of the stakes. One wrong movement, one knock, one glance, and his secret would be exposed to the wrong eyes. Ethan's mind raced. The hormones weren't just changing his body, they were reshaping his emotions, amplifying every fear and desire. He thought of Isabella, of their relationship, and the risk he had taken. Could she accept him? Did he even want to be accepted in this form, or was this about exploring himself fully, regardless of consequences? He felt tears prick at the corners of his eyes. The vulnerability was overwhelming. He had wanted this transformation secretly, but now it was undeniable, and the stakes were terrifying. Every heartbeat reminded him of the fragility of the moment. Isabella stepped closer, her hand brushing lightly against his arm, grounding him in a way that made his heart race. "You're still you, Ethan," she said softly. But before he could respond, the doorknob rattled violently again, startling him. He stumbled slightly, heels slipping on the hardwood floor, skirt swaying dangerously. The wig shifted, threatening to fall, and his pulse spiked. His reflection in the mirror captured the chaos, the vulnerability, the thrill, the fear, the undeniable change. The visitor outside demanded attention, forcing him to make a split-second decision: confront the intruder in this fully transformed state, or attempt to hide and risk drawing suspicion. Ethan froze, caught between worlds. He could feel the changes in his body, the thrill of transformation, the risk of exposure, and the intensity of Isabella's gaze all colliding into one sharp point of tension. The doorknob rattled again. Isabella's hand tightened around his arm, grounding him. "Whatever happens, we face it together," she said, eyes steady, unwavering. And then, the door slowly creaked open. The screen would cut here, leaving viewers on the edge of their seats. Ethan's future, his relationship, and the consequences of the accidental hormones hung in the balance. The door had barely cracked open when Ethan's heart seemed to stop. He could feel every change in his body, the swell of his chest, the sway of his hips, the softness of his face, as if the hormones were amplifying his awareness, making every sensation sharper, every movement more precarious. Isabella's grip on his arm was a tether to reality, grounding him, yet also reminding him of the risk. She had seen so much already, the glimpse of the woman he had secretly wanted to be. And now, the unknown figure at the door threatened to shatter the fragile control he still held. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. The visitor, just a shadow at first, stepped closer, hand on the doorknob, hesitation in their movement. Every instinct screamed for him to hide, to retreat, to somehow undo the visible transformation that had overtaken his body. But it was too late. The hormones had progressed too far. The reflection in the mirror wasn't a temporary disguise, it was him. He glanced at Isabella, whose eyes were fixed on him with a mixture of curiosity and concern. "What do we do?" he thought, panic surging through every nerve. His lips parted, then closed, then parted again. Words failed him. Every second stretched painfully long. Ethan felt a cocktail of emotions: fear, exhilaration, vulnerability, and a strange, growing confidence. The hormones had altered not just his body, but his perception of himself. He was undeniably different now, undeniably beautiful in a way he had only dreamed of. But beauty didn't erase danger. One wrong glance, one slip of the wig, one accidental click of his heels, and the secret would be exposed. Everything he had hidden for years, the late-night experiments, the subtle crossdressing, the carefully guarded identity, was at risk. He could feel the pulse of his own heartbeat echoing in his ears. The silk skirt clung to his hips, The blouse brushed his chest in a way that made him hyper-aware of every curve, and the wig had begun to slide down one side of his face. Every detail mattered now. Her hand tightened on his arm, a grounding anchor in the chaos. "We'll handle this together," she whispered, her voice calm, steady, yet filled with emotion. Ethan could see the conflict in her eyes: shock, curiosity, and perhaps a trace of excitement. She had glimpsed the real him, more than the man she knew, more than she had ever imagined. But the unknown visitor didn't wait. A knock, louder this time, demanded immediate attention. Ethan froze, caught between the fear of exposure and the thrill of being fully seen by Isabella. Ethan's reflection in the mirror became the focal point of his inner turmoil. Two selves stared back: the man he had been, rigid, controlled, hidden, and the woman he had accidentally become, soft, vulnerable, yet radiant. The wig slipping over one eye, the skirt swaying with a subtle rhythm, the heels precariously balancing him. Every element symbolized the duality of his existence. He realized, in that moment, that there was no turning back. The hormones had already begun rewriting his life, his identity, his reality. Every secret he had guarded, every private desire he had nurtured, now hung in the balance, exposed to the scrutiny of someone else's gaze. The visitor pushed the door open fully. Light spilled into the apartment, casting long shadows across the floor. Ethan's pulse thundered in his chest, each beat synchronized with the nervous sway of his hips, the delicate balance of his heels, the subtle fall of his wig. Isabella's eyes met his, steady, unwavering, a silent promise that she was still by his side. But the tension didn't lift. It thickened, wrapping around him like a vice. The stranger stepped closer, silhouette partially revealed, voice just out of hearing. Ethan's mind raced. Should he speak? Should he flee? Should he try to hide the transformation that had already reshaped him? Every option carried risk, and every decision could change everything. And then, the screen would cut, leaving the audience suspended, their hearts racing alongside Ethan's.